Welcome to Weather Extra. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. The beginning of October was relatively quiet across the majority of the nation, but the active weather returned coast to coast this past week. Here's a look at some of the top weather stories to kick off this episode of Weather Extra. We start out in the west as heavy tropical rain prompted flooding over the holiday weekend and to the early parts of last week. Thanks to the remnants of a few tropical systems in the eastern Pacific, flood watches were issued for several states, including Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah. Flash floods swept away cars in northwest New Mexico, and around Las Vegas, nearly an inch of rain fell, which is roughly triple what the area sees on average for the entire month of October. And rescuers had to lift a driver from floodwaters in Arizona as her vehicle was swept away. Up to 2.5 inches of rain fell around Phoenix, which is several months' worth of rain that fell in a few days. A microburst erupted on Columbus Day and left a trail of damage that brought down trees, totaled cars, and destroyed buildings in Tempe, Arizona. Widespread 70-mile-per-hour winds were reported with gusts reaching up to 90 miles per hour. And across Southern California, a rare severe thunderstorm watch was issued this past Tuesday for LA. This was the first watch of that kind since 2008. Severe thunderstorms brought record-setting rain, which caused localized flooding along city streets in Burbank. 2.37 inches of rain fell on Tuesday, which became the rainiest October day in the city's history. Between 3 and 5 inches fell around LA, and in the San Gabriel Mountains, up to 6 inches fell. Heavy rain fell on top of the Pacific Palisades area, which was devastated by the wildfires back in January. The heavy rain made the area vulnerable to mudslides, which led to the evacuation of over 100 homes. The heavy rain also extended further north around the Bay Area, which caused flooding around San Francisco and San Jose. And the Sierra Nevada mountains saw its first snowfall of the season. 2 to 3 feet of snow fell, along with winds up to 70 miles per hour. A winter storm warning was issued by the National Weather Service, which was the first of the winter season. Now to the East Coast. A powerful nor'easter made its way up along the Atlantic coast over the holiday weekend and into the early parts of the work week. Strong winds and large waves were seen along the coastline of the Carolinas, up further northeast in the mid-Atlantic states, and eventually into the New England area. Several inches of rain fell across those regions and brought coastal flooding. The persistent onshore tropical storm force winds that triggered 2 to 4 feet of seawater to rise in streets. The heavy rain also led to numerous water rescues in several states. Air travel was also disrupted as more than 8,000 flights were delayed and about 800 cancellations, and tens of thousands were left without power after toppled trees took down transformers. Now to Alaska, where some communities in the western part of the state were devastated by floods caused by the remnants of a typhoon. The storm slammed into villages early last week, and the record-setting flooding damaged key roads and regional airports. Over 50 people and 2 dogs were rescued from a village, and more than 1,400 were displaced and 3 went missing. The powerful coastal storm moved into the Bering Sea and brought hurricane-force wind gusts of up to 100 miles per hour and massive waves, which caused the major coastal flooding. And what made the destruction worse was this was the second storm that brought deadly storm surge so far this month, which officials said created the dire situation. A new investigation from CBS News and KFF, an independent organization that reports on national health issues, looks at hospitals in precarious locations. Hospitals all across the country in flood zones are finding themselves in big trouble as extreme weather puts them in danger of damage and, in some cases, destruction.
Where were the ambulances?
The ambulances were to the left right here at the ER entrance.
A year ago, Unicoi County Hospital was hit with a flood so bad the community's ambulances were nearly swallowed by water. Emergency manager Jimmy Irwin was on the scene, worried the entire hospital would be swept away.
So the clock was ticking because you thought the building was going to go?
Yeah.
And everybody's on the roof?
Everybody's on the roof.
It took 4 helicopters to airlift everyone to safety. But what's come into focus since is where Unicoi Hospital was built, in a floodplain. And an investigation by our partners at KFF Health News, who analyzed proprietary flooding data from the company Fathom, identified at least 170 other U.S. hospitals facing the greatest risk of potentially dangerous flooding. Each of those hospitals could be shut down by a 100-year flood, the kind of extreme weather that has become more common due to climate change.
I suppose they're all thinking this is never going to happen to them, too.
Hopefully, seeing what happened in Tennessee and what's happened in other areas, Maybe it'll make someone start thinking.
This investigation also found that much of the identified hospital flood risk, some seen here in animations from around the country, does not show up on FEMA's official flood maps, in part because those maps are outdated and do not account for climate change.
Huge change in the hydrology.
Andrew Joyner is Tennessee state climatologist who works with emergency managers to mitigate the impact of climate disasters.
So how do you plan for that?
It's difficult. I mean, I think right now, the planning is hoping that something doesn't happen.
And when it comes to planning for the worst impacts of climate change on America's hospitals, Jimmy Irwin has learned that hope may not be the best strategy.
People go to the hospitals for help, not to be caught in a situation where no one can help them.
David Schechter, CBS News.
Temperatures haven't felt very fall-like so far this season, but there's something else that helps us know we're in fall, and it's crickets. First Alert meteorologist C.D. Finley spoke with the entomologist to learn why we see so many crickets during this time of the year.
You've heard them, and you've definitely seen them. Cricket season is upon us. I spoke with entomologist and president of iPest Solutions, John Fell, to learn more about these pesky crickets.
We start seeing crickets become active typically late summer, early fall, usually around that first cool front we get, about a 6-week period that we notice the increase in activity.
But why are there so many?
They are very prolific. So female crickets can lay up to 400 eggs each. And so it doesn't take a lot of crickets to become a big problem fast.
And how many are there?
Millions. Lots and lots of them. Biggest problem people have is, one, they're gross, but two is the odor. They really have a bad pungent smell to them when they get in large numbers.
So what should you do to avoid these large, loud, and smelly cricket populations? John suggests doing what he calls mechanical control.
With mechanical control, sealing up entry points, replacing weather stripping, caulking around the foundations, turning off lights at night.
And if you would like to learn more about protecting your home from crickets, you can find more in the article on our website at KWTX.com. From KWTX, I'm First Alert meteorologist C.D. Finley.
Coral reefs are in danger as ocean temperatures reach record highs. And straight ahead on Weather Extra, we hear from scientists who are developing a special gel to help rebuild reefs. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. An alarming new report shows our planet Earth has reached its first climate tipping point, the widespread death of coral reefs. We've talked about coral reefs in Weather Extra numerous times, so if you've tuned in before, you know that they are an essential habitat for marine species. They're vital for food security, buffer coastal areas from storms, and contribute heavily to the global economy. But now, as oceans reach record high temperatures, 80% of the world's reefs have been affected by the worst mass bleaching event on record. The report was put together by 160 scientists worldwide. They say the death of coral reefs is just the first of several potentially irreversible effects of our warming planet, and even bigger impacts are on the horizon if temperatures continue to rise. And because coral reefs are key to supporting important ecosystems on Earth, researchers at the University of California, San Diego are experimenting with a new way to protect coral from future damage. Vanessa Paz spoke with one of the researchers and has more on the project.
So these are the tanks.
Inside a small and temperature-controlled room at UCSD's Scripps Institution of Oceanography.
We are increasing the temperature in these tanks.
Associate researcher Daniel and his team start their day tending to an unusual nursery.
They feed on little tiny particles.
Tanks filled with baby coral.
It's our approach to enhance the growth.
These corals are part of a series of experiments aimed at reviving reefs threatened by warming oceans.
Are they looking good?
Pollution and disease, the main drivers of coral bleaching.
Bleaching is basically a stress response. When coral gets sick, essentially, it loses the main compartment that produces energy. So it's, you can imagine like an engine. And so these are tiny microscopic algae that live inside the animal. And primarily when it gets too hot, those algae are expelled from the tissue. And so then that makes the coral weak. And can lead to death.
Now, Daniel and his team have a new tool.
This liquid, especially because when you shine light on it, becomes jelly.
SnapX, a scented gel that can be painted or sprayed onto damaged reefs or even 3D printed attachments like this one, made in their lab.
We try to create an environment that the baby coral likes.
Coral larvae are picky where they settle. They look for chemical cues from healthy reefs. SnapX uses natural chemicals from crustous coralline algae to mimic those cues.
On a degraded reef or an artificial reef, you don't have these chemical signals, or you have less of those, right? You might have signals that come from competitive algae that actually deters the coral larvae from settling. So you get an individual animal from the entire colony.
In lab and field tests, coral treated with SnapX attracted 20 times more larvae than untreated surfaces. It works immediately and lasts up to a month.
We've studied the main reef building corals in Hawaii and showed that these scents work for this coral. But we have more work to do.
Daniel and his team also developed Coral Guard
to enhance the survivorship of the recruits.
It's a protective coating that blocks harmful competitors from growing over new coral. And they've created a new particle that could reduce coral bleaching by lowering toxic stress chemicals inside the coral. And the best part, all of it, including SnapX, is made with natural biomaterials, essentially taking from nature to give back to nature.
The causes of reef degradation are man-made. So why shouldn't the solutions be man-made as well? For anyone that has been diving on a reef, you know the beauty. There's a high aesthetic value. Coral reefs are hotspots of biodiversity. About 1/4 of all marine life of biodiversity is hosted in coral reefs. And at the same time, they are also a powerhouse in terms of the ecosystem goods and services they provide.
Obesity affects 40% of adults in the U.S. And coming up next on Weather Extra is this week's Degrees of Science. And in our conversation this week, we learned more about the scientific research that tries to uncover if eating unprocessed beef is related to obesity. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Weather Extra. There's been a long-standing public health assumption that links the eating of unprocessed beef to an increased risk of obesity and other related conditions. In this week's Degrees of Science, Brady Taylor speaks with a researcher from Texas Tech that's taking a scientific look to see if this link between beef and obesity is valid.
Where did the stigma of beef leading to potentially obesity come from?
There have been studies done and published that suggested that those studies were saying that eating beef is associated with obesity. And the key word here is associated. And associations do not show causation. That's the first concept we need to clarify here. So if, for example, if in month of December, grass is brown and people wear warm clothes. So it's not that the warm clothes are turning that grass brown. They are not related, right? They are just association. Both are present at the same time, but not one is causing the other. And that's an association. And the studies that have been done thus far, some of them showed that people who eat beef more frequently have obesity. So that from that to jump to conclusion that beef is causing obesity is a jump in logic here. And the other part about this is those studies that have been done, most of them used a technique. I wouldn't consider that as very reliable in terms of acquiring data. Those studies asked people, what did you eat yesterday? 24-hour food recall. What did you eat yesterday? That's one. The other technique is called food frequency questionnaire, meaning you ask that in approximately in last 6 months, how often you have eaten beef, how often you have eaten fruits, and so on and so forth. And both these, in my opinion, do not give very accurate answers. And there have been many studies, there have been many calls to that effect. There are also studies that have been done in the past where people have actually been fed beef. Here is take a group of people, give them beef, a group of people who don't have that intervention, that's the control group. and then see what happens. Now, those studies we thought would give us real glimpse into real answer into what is the effect of beef on obesity. And those studies are called RCT, randomized controlled trials. What we conducted is called a meta-analysis and a systematic review. So that means we went into 7 databases of scientific literature and we looked at 5,600 studies. We further went into those studies and ultimately we found there were 24 studies that were those RCTs, randomized controlled trials or randomized crossover design. They fit our requirement that actually studied giving beef and what is the effect on weight, body weight, or body mass index, or obesity. Then we put all of them together and analyze them. That's called meta-analysis. And to see, because if you just look at one study may tell you one direction, next study may tell you something else. But what is the collective evidence of 24 studies is telling you is what we wanted to see. So 24 studies together told us that eating unprocessed red meat had no effect on body weight, body fat, or body mass index. We know that beef is an important food in many diets. It supplies good protein, vitamin B, and then minerals such as iron or zinc. So it's an important nutrient. You don't need to eliminate it from your diet if you don't have to. And so our study was only to find out, is it okay to eat beef from this point of view, from body weight point of view?
So you've got your nutritional science background. When it comes to proteins, how does red meat compare to other alternative protein sources you could have?
Overall, in general, proteins of animal origin are considered higher quality in the sense they are easier for us to convert them into our body proteins. So egg protein or beef protein or milk protein are considered higher quality protein compared to proteins we also get from vegetable sources such as legumes, beans, lentils, and those proteins they may have similar amount of protein, but they are considered little, biologically speaking, little lower quality protein. But one last thing to mention when it comes to obesity, the animal variety of proteins such as beef protein or chicken or fish, in about 100 grams, they have something between 100 to 200 calories, and they provide 20 to 25 grams of protein. The vegetable source, for example, lentils and beans, they also provide 20 to 25 grams of protein in that ballpark, but they have about 350 calories per 100 grams instead of about 100 to 200 calories. So there are all these differences to be considered.
To hear more about this research and Brady's full Degrees of Science conversation, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube or go over to our website at KWTX.com/degrees of science. Residents in Southern California are beginning to try to rebuild after the devastating wildfires at the start of the year. But up next on Weather Extra, we learn of a new report that could prevent the building process from starting. We'll be right back with that report. Welcome back to Weather Extra. In Altadena, California, thousands of homeowners are struggling to rebuild after January's devastating wildfires. And a new report warns the ground where their homes once stood may now be toxic. CBS's Elise Preston reports on the contamination threatening to derail the recovery.
It's a little scary.
With a spoon and sandwich bags, lifelong Altadena resident Gillian Selsby collects soil samples from the land she's called home for decades to have it tested for toxins. She and her husband lost their home in January's Eaton fire. Her parents also lost their Altadena home. Both couples plan to rebuild, but before they break ground, they have to be sure that ground is safe.
Are you concerned that their property has contaminants as well? Yes, and I want to make sure that they aren't exposed to anything because they're 87 and 90 years old.
In its final report, the Los Angeles County Health Department found that nearly 45% of destroyed and intact Altadena properties had significantly higher levels of lead than what the state deems safe. The University of Southern California is also conducting its own soil testing study for concerned families. Sujit Rao directs the project.
Once the smoke dissipated and once the fires were out, what goes up must come down. And so the question is, well, what was remaining in the soil?
Exposure to lead can cause brain and kidney damage and developmental delays.
If young children or people who are pregnant come in contact with soils that have really elevated levels of lead, over time, that lead can accumulate in the body.
USC's data is consistent with LA County's report, finding lead contamination is still present in the Eaton Fire burn zone, even where the Army Corps of Engineers has removed 6 inches of soil.
Why can't you take another 6 inches? It's not that much more of an effort, especially to give us peace of mind.
According to advocacy group Department of Angels, more than 1 in 3 Altadena homeowners have not gotten the soil testing they want. In extreme cases, hazardous soil will have to be removed as part of a rebuild.
I love it when I hear that people are rebuilding, because that's kind of the scaffolding that's keeping us all up.
For Selsby, hope has also bloomed in unexpected places.
We never planted this flower. It's getting bigger and bigger, and it's going to have a very special place in our garden. I feel like an angel brought it here.
A symbol of new life rising from the dust and ashes of the fire. Elise Preston, CBS News, Altadena, California.
That's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. We'll see you right back here next weekend. Have a great week.